I bought my dad a rare $18,000 Rolex for his 70th birthday. He opened the box, tossed it across the table, and said, "Keep your trash. You'll never be the son I wanted." Everyone went quiet. I picked up the box, looked him in the eye, and said, "Remember that." The next morning, Dad opened his safe and started pounding on my door before sunrise. The box was navy blue with a gold clasp, and my father threw it across the table before the candles were out. I had carried it into the restaurant in the inside pocket of my jacket, the weight of it against my chest for the entire drive from Portland to the family house in Beaverton, 22 minutes of highway, with an $18,000 Rolex Submariner pressing against my heartbeat. I had bought it 6 weeks earlier from a certified dealer in Seattle, a 2019 reference 1166 Tento LN with a black ceramic bezel and a serial number I could recite from memory, because I am the kind of person who memorizes serial numbers, which is the same kind of person my father has spent 34 years calling the wrong kind. The party was at Bernice and Lester Odell's house, the house I had been supplementing the mortgage on for 4 years without anyone at the table knowing except my mother, who knew everything and said nothing, because saying something would have meant admitting that her husband's pension did not cover the life he pretended it did. 22 people. My brother Gavin and his wife, my Aunt Maxine, cousins, neighbors, my father's old machinist crew from the plant, a sheet cake from the bakery on Canyon Road with Happy 70th Lester and blue frosting. And at the head of the table, my father, 70 years old, wearing the flannel shirt he wore to every event because Lester Odell did not believe in dressing up for people who should already know what he looked like. I waited until the cake was cut and the coffee was poured, and the room was full and warm and ready for the kind of moment a son gives a father when the son has spent 34 years trying to build something the father would recognize as worthy. Then I stood up and walked to the head of the table and set the box in front of him. "Happy birthday, Dad." The room quieted the way rooms do when a gift appears in a box that expensive. The navy leather, the gold clasp, the weight of it on the tablecloth. Gavin leaned forward from his seat, his lawyer's eyes already appraising. Bernice put her hand on Lester's arm. Aunt Maxine, sitting at the far end of the table, caught my eye and nodded once, because Maxine was the only person in the family who knew what was in the box and what it had cost me and why I was giving it. Lester opened the clasp. He lifted the lid. The Submariner sat on a pillow of white satin, black dial, steel bracelet, the kind of watch a man puts on once and wears for the rest of his life. The room made the sound rooms make when $18,000 catches the light. Lester looked at the watch for 4 seconds. Then he closed the box. Then he pushed it across the table with the heel of his hand. The box slid past the cake, past the coffee cups, past Gavin's plate, and stopped against the bread basket at the edge of the table. "Keep your trash." The room went silent. Not the comfortable silence of a pause. The heavy silence of a room full of people who have just watched something break. "You'll never be the son I wanted." Lester picked up his coffee and drank from it as if the sentence were a weather report. Gavin graduated top of his class. Gavin passed the bar. Gavin built a practice. And you walk in here with a watch like that buys 34 years of being the wrong son. You type on a computer, Sawyer. You are not a professional. You are not a man your mother can brag about at church. You are a boy who plays with screens. And no amount of jewelry is going to change the fact that you were never what this family needed. 22 people heard every word. The machinist crew looked at the tablecloth. Gavin looked at his plate. Bernice's hand was still on Lester's arm, not restraining, anchoring, the way a woman anchors a man she has been protecting from his own mouth for 40 years and has decided tonight is not the night to stop. A cousin near the window put her fork down. The room was so quiet I could hear the cake frosting drying under the dining room light. I stood at the head of the table for 3 seconds. Then I walked to the bread basket, picked up the Rolex box, and held it in my right hand. I looked at my father, the man who had spent 3 decades comparing me to a brother who went to law school on a loan I secretly funded, in a house whose mortgage I quietly paid, at a table where the food was bought with money that came from a career he called playing with screens. Remember that, I said. 2 words. The room heard them and did not know what they meant. My father heard them and thought they meant hurt. They did not mean hurt. They meant accounting. And I am very good at accounting. Welcome to Family Secret Tales, where the son who types on a computer built everything the father is sitting on. If you have ever given someone the best you had and watched them throw it across a table, subscribe now and stay, because the safe opens tomorrow morning, and what's inside it is worth more than a watch. I drove home to Portland at 9:30. I did not stay for the rest of the party. I did not say goodbye to Gavin or Bernice or any of the 22 people who had watched my father throw an $18,000 gift and call his son trash. I drove 22 minutes on the highway with the Rolex box on the passenger seat and my hands at 10 and 2 and my jaw set and the sentence playing on a loop behind my eyes, "You'll never be the son I wanted." My name is Sawyer Odell. I am 34 years old. I am a senior software engineer at a fintech company in Portland, Oregon. I build the transaction processing systems that move money between banks. My salary is $195,000 a year, which is more than my father earned in his best 3 years combined at the machining plant, and more than my brother Gavin's law firm has grossed in any single year since he opened it, and more than anyone in the Odell family has ever made from anything. And nobody at that table knows the number because nobody has ever asked. What they know is that I type on a computer. What they know is that Gavin is the lawyer. What they know is that Lester wanted 2 lawyers and got 1 lawyer and 1 disappointment. And the disappointment is the one who showed up with an $18,000 watch and got told to keep his trash. What they do not know is that the disappointment has been keeping the family solvent for 6 years. The financial architecture of the Odell family, every payment, every account, every automatic transfer, runs through a laptop in a Portland apartment operated by the son Lester calls a boy who plays with screens. And last night, the architect decided to pull the blueprints. Aunt Maxine is Lester's younger sister, 65, retired from teaching middle school math in Salem. She is the only person in the family who has ever asked me what I do for a living and listened to the answer. 2 years ago, at a family barbecue, where Lester told his machinist friends that Gavin was the successful one, Maxine pulled me aside near the fence and said, "Your father wanted a copy of himself. You were always the original." I carried that sentence the way other people carry photographs. It fit in every pocket. Maxine knew about the mortgage because I told her when it started. She told me to document everything. She told me to keep receipts. She told me that a family that cannot see your value will one day need you to prove it. And proof requires paper. I listened because Maxine was a math teacher, and math teachers understand ledgers, and a ledger is just a story told in numbers, and the numbers in this family's story all had my name on them. 4 years ago, Bernice called me on a Sunday night. Lester's pension from the plant was $2,800 a month. The mortgage payment was $2,200. That left $600 for utilities, food, insurance, medical, and everything else that a 70-year-old retired machinist needs to maintain the illusion that he is still providing for his family. The math did not work. Bernice asked if I could help with the gap. How much is the gap? $1,400 a month, just until your father's Social Security kicks in at full benefit. Full benefit was 2 years away. I said yes. 2 years became 4. $1,400 a month for 48 months, $67,200. Deposited into the household account on the 15th of every month from an automatic transfer I set up on my laptop. Bernice told Lester the pension had been adjusted upward by the plant's retirement office. Lester believed her because Lester had never once looked at a bank statement in his life. The man who called me a boy who plays with screens had never opened the screen that showed him where his money came from. 6 years ago, Gavin needed $85,000 to open his law firm. Office lease, furniture, licensing, malpractice insurance, a paralegal's first-year salary. Lester told Gavin the money would come from the family trust. There was no family trust. There was me. Bernice called on a Wednesday, the same time slot she reserved for financial requests, and asked if I could lend Gavin the startup capital. I wrote the check because Gavin was my brother, and because I believed at that point that helping your family meant they would eventually help you back. The $85,000 was structured as a loan. Gavin signed a promissory note. Repayment was supposed to begin after year 2. Year 2 passed. Year 3 passed. No payments. Gavin told Bernice the firm was reinvesting. What Gavin was actually doing was falling behind on office rent, losing clients to larger firms, and quietly withdrawing from the medical fund I had set up for Bernice, $800 a month that I deposited into a separate account for her prescriptions and specialist visits. Gavin had taken $14,400 from that fund over 18 months. Bernice knew because the withdrawals required her login. She did not tell me, because telling me would have meant admitting that the lawyer's son was stealing from the medical fund the computer's son was paying for. I knew. I knew because I built the account. I set up the alerts. I saw every withdrawal notification on my phone at the same time Bernice was pretending they were not happening. I had the records, the timestamps, the transfer amounts. I had the proof the way I have proof of every transaction that moves through the systems I build, because money leaves trails, and I read trails for a living. I pulled into my apartment parking garage at 10:15. I sat in the car for 10 minutes with the Rolex box in my hand. The Submariner was still inside. The clasp was still closed. The serial number was still the one I had memorized, because I am the kind of man who remembers numbers, and the number that mattered tonight was not on the watch. It was in the safe. I almost left the box in my car and went to bed. My body was tired and my chest was heavy, and the sentence was still playing. You'll never be the son I wanted. And a part of me wanted to set the box on my nightstand and sleep, and decide in the morning whether the word remember was a threat or a feeling. But Aunt Maxine's voice stopped me. Maxine had called me the night before the party, after I told her what I was planning to give Lester, and she had said something I carried into the restaurant and carried out again and was carrying now. Your father wanted a copy of himself. You were always the original. Give the gift. If he throws it, you will know what to do. I knew what to do. I drove back to Beaverton at 11 p.m. The highway was empty and the Rolex box was on the passenger seat, and the headlights carved a tunnel through the dark, and I thought about the last time I had driven this highway with something expensive in the car. It was 4 years ago, the night I drove the first mortgage supplement check to Bernice, because the direct deposit had not been set up yet. I had written it at my kitchen table, $1,400, memo line, household, and I had driven it to Beaverton and handed it to my mother in the driveway, and she had looked at the check and looked at me and said, "Your father cannot know." That was the sentence that started everything. Your father cannot know. And for 4 years, I had honored it. Driving the highway between Portland and Beaverton with checks and transfers in silence. Keeping the secret that my father's life was built on a son he would not acknowledge, funded by a career he would not respect, maintained by a man he would not call the one he wanted. Tonight I was driving the same highway with a different delivery. Not a check. An ending. The house was dark. The party was over. The cars were gone. The cake plates were probably still on the counter because Bernice always left them until morning. Lester and Bernice were asleep. I used my key, the same key I had been using for 6 years, to check on the house, to fix the water heater, to replace the smoke detector batteries, to unclog the bathroom drain that Lester's back would not let him reach, to do every piece of maintenance that a retired machinist can no longer do when his body has been used up by the same career his son was supposed to want. I walked through the kitchen without turning on the lights. I stepped over the spot on the floor where the linoleum was peeling because I had scheduled a replacement for next month that would now not happen. I went to the den. I opened the safe. The combination was 11/28/72. Lester's birthday. I knew it because I set the safe up. I bought it. I bolted it to the floor with lag screws I drilled myself. I programmed the combination. And inside it I had placed, over 4 years, the documents that formed the financial architecture of the Odell family, the mortgage statements, the investment account paperwork, the promissory note Gavin signed for the $85,000, and the medical fund records showing every deposit I made and every withdrawal Gavin took. I placed the Rolex box on top of the stack. Navy blue leather on white paper. The watch Lester had called trash, sitting on the proof that the son who bought it had been funding the family's existence for 6 years. Then I placed the attorney's letter next to it. 1 page. 3 paragraphs. Effective immediately, all monthly mortgage supplements will cease. The $85,000 promissory note will be called in full, with a demand for repayment within 90 days. All contributions to the Bernice Odell Medical Fund will be terminated, and a formal accounting of unauthorized withdrawals totaling $14,400 will be demanded from Gavin Odell. I closed the safe, I locked it, I drove home. And I went to sleep knowing that the first thing my father did every morning at 5:45 a.m. was open that safe and check the documents inside it. Because Lester Odell was the kind of man who believed that checking a safe made him responsible, even though he had never once understood what the documents inside it actually said. Welcome back to Family Secret Tales. If you are the one who fills the safe while the man who owns it calls you trash, hit subscribe, because the safe opens at 5:45 and the Rolex is waiting. At 5:51 a.m., my phone rang. Not a text, not a voicemail, a call. Lester Odell, who had not called me voluntarily since 2019, was calling me at 5:51 on a Sunday morning. I did not answer. At 5:53, he called again. At 5:55. At 5:58. At 6:02, I heard a car engine in the parking garage below my apartment. At 6:09, someone was pounding on my front door. I opened it in a t-shirt and sweatpants. My father stood in the hallway in the same flannel shirt from the party, untucked, his face the color of wet paper, holding the Rolex box in one hand and the attorney's letter in the other. Behind him, barely visible in the hallway light, Bernice stood with her car keys and her purse and the face of a woman who had been awake for 10 minutes and had not had time to prepare a story. What is this? Lester held up the letter. His hand was shaking. Not the controlled shake of a man who is angry. The involuntary shake of a man who has just read 3 paragraphs that ended the financial floor under his feet and does not understand how the floor was there in the first place. It is a letter from my attorney. I read the letter. I want to know what it means. It means what it says. The mortgage supplement stops. The loan is called. The medical fund is closed. What mortgage supplement? Bernice closed her eyes. The $1,400 a month that has been deposited into your household account on the 15th of every month for 4 years. $67,200 from my bank account to yours. Because your pension does not cover your mortgage and it never has, and Mom asked me to close the gap. And I closed it for 4 years while you told people I play with screens. Lester looked at Bernice. You told me the pension was adjusted. Bernice did not open her eyes. It was not adjusted, Lester. Then where has the money been coming from? From Sawyer. It has been coming from Sawyer for 4 years. The hallway was quiet. A neighbor 2 doors down opened their door, looked at the scene, and closed it again. And the $85,000? The trust fund for Gavin's firm? There is no trust fund, I said. There is a promissory note signed by Gavin, a check from my account, and 0 repayments in 3 years. I funded your son's law firm, the son you wanted, the one who passed the bar and built a practice. I paid for the practice. And the practice is failing, Dad. Gavin is 3 months behind on office rent. His firm grossed $61,000 last year against $84,000 in operating costs. He has been withdrawing from Mom's medical fund to cover his overhead. $14,400 in 18 months, taken from the account I set up to pay for Mom's prescriptions. Lester's face went through something I had never seen. Not anger. Anger has a direction. This had none. His jaw opened slightly. His eyes moved from the letter to the Rolex box and back. His left knee buckled, and he put his hand on the doorframe. His breathing went shallow, and his nostrils flared, and the flannel shirt moved with the rapid rise and fall of a chest that was processing numbers it had never seen before, attached to a son it had never valued, funding a life it had never questioned. "You have been paying my mortgage." His voice was flat, empty, the voice of a man reading the instructions on a machine he does not know how to operate. "For 4 years. And Gavin's firm. $85,000. And your mother's medical. $800 a month until Gavin started draining it." Lester looked at the Rolex box in his hand. The box he had pushed across a table 6 hours ago and called trash. The box that was now sitting in his palm next to a letter that said the son who bought it was the same son who had been paying for everything. "You put this in my safe. I put the watch and the letter in your safe because the safe is where you keep the things you think are important. And the watch is the least important thing I have ever given you." The mortgage was more. The firm was more. Mom's medical fund was more. "You have been living on my money for 6 years, and last night you threw my gift across a table and told 22 people I was trash. I almost let him in." His face was broken, and his hand was on my doorframe, and the flannel shirt was the same one he had worn to every birthday party since I was 12. And for 1 second, the boy who had driven 22 minutes with a Rolex in his jacket wanted to open the door wider and say it was fine. But the sentence stopped me. "You'll never be the son I wanted," said in front of 22 people. In front of Aunt Maxine, who had told me I was the original. In front of Gavin, who said nothing. In front of the machinist who had watched a man throw his son's gift and call it trash. That sentence was not a mistake. It was a verdict delivered at a party paid for, with money I earned from a career he called playing with screens. I am telling you what happens now. The mortgage supplement stops on Friday. Your pension is $2,800 a month, and your mortgage is $2,200. That leaves you $600 for everything else, which is the math you have been living above for 4 years because I was covering the difference. The $85,000 loan to Gavin is being called. My attorney will send the demand letter Monday. Gavin has 90 days to repay, or I file a civil suit. And the medical fund is closed because Gavin stole from it, and you did not notice, and Mom did not tell me, and I am not refilling an account that your golden son is emptying to keep a failing law firm alive. Sawyer, I am your father, and I am the son you did not want. The son who types on a computer. The son whose gift you threw across a table in front of your friends. You called me trash in front of 22 people, Dad. You told me I would never be the son you wanted. Remember that? I told you to remember it. This is what remembering costs. Lester's hand dropped from the doorframe. His body went through the collapse, the way a building goes through a demolition when the supports are pulled in sequence. First his hand, then the shoulder that followed it down. Then both knees bending, slow and involuntary. The kind of bending that happens when a man's legs receive information his mouth has been refusing for 6 years. Then the full weight of a 70-year-old retired machinist settling against the hallway wall, with the Rolex box still in one hand and the attorney's letter crumpling in the other. His face went gray from the jaw down. His eyes filled, but the tears did not fall, held back by the last piece of pride in a man whose pride had been funded by the son he was looking at. I looked at the Rolex box in his hand, the box I had carried into the restaurant, the box he had pushed across the table, the box I had placed in the safe at 11 p.m., the box he had carried to my door at 6 a.m. You threw $18,000 and called it trash. The safe held $67,000. The loan was $85,000. The fund was $14,400. You threw the smallest number, Dad. The hallway held every word. I looked at Bernice, who had opened her eyes and was standing in the hallway with her hands clasped at her waist and tears tracking silently down both cheeks. My mother. The woman who had called me every Sunday night for 6 years to discuss the accounts and the transfers and the payments. The woman who had orchestrated every financial arrangement in the family, who had asked for the mortgage gap and the firm loan and the medical fund, who had positioned me as the silent engine of the Odell family, while her husband sat at the head of a table and called the engine trash. You knew about the mortgage, Mom. You knew about the firm. You knew Gavin was taking from the medical fund. You knew all of it. And last night, you sat at that table with your hand on Dad's arm while he threw my watch and called me the wrong son. And you did not say a word. Not one word. Bernice pressed her lips together. Her chin trembled once. I was trying to keep the family together. The family was together because I was paying for it. And nobody at that table knew. And the one person who should have said something was holding his arm while he told me I was trash. I turned to Lester. You called the Rolex trash. You called me trash. You told me I would never be the son you wanted. The son you wanted is 3 months behind on his rent and stealing from Mom's medical fund. That is the son you wanted. I am the son who paid for everything. And I am done. This is the last payment, the last supplement, the last loan, the last time I open that safe or write a check or transfer $1 for a family that treats my money like oxygen and my presence like a disease. The watch is in the box. The box is yours. I gave it to you because I wanted you to have something beautiful from the son you never thought was enough. You threw it. That is your choice. But the mortgage was my choice, and the firm was my choice, and the fund was my choice, and I am making a different choice now. Lester stood in the hallway with the Rolex box in one hand and the attorney's letter in the other, and his flannel shirt untucked, and his face the color of a man who has just read the receipt for 34 years of contempt. He looked at the box. He looked at the letter. He looked at me. Take the watch back. I was wrong. Just leave the safe alone. The watch is yours. I gave it to you. A gift does not get returned because the giver stops funding the recipient. The safe is not yours, Dad. I bought it. I installed it. I filled it. Everything in that safe exists because I put it there. And now the letter exists because I put that there too. I did not take the box. I stepped back. I closed the door. The last thing I saw was my father standing in a hallway at 6 a.m, holding an $18,000 watch and a one-page letter. And the distance between those two objects was everything he had said at that table and everything he was about to lose because of it. The fallout arrived the way financial defaults arrive, precisely, on schedule, and without negotiation. The mortgage supplement stopped on Friday. The automatic transfer I had been running for 48 months did not process on the 15th for the first time since I set it up. The household account balance dropped by $1,400 overnight, and Bernice saw it at 7 a.m. when she checked the balance online the way she checked it every morning, watching for the deposit that had been keeping her family above water since Lester retired. The deposit was not there. The screen showed $1,847.22, where it usually showed $3,247.22. And the difference between those two numbers was the exact shape and size of the son Lester had called trash. The mortgage payment was $2,200. The pension was $2,800. After mortgage, that left $600 for utilities, food, insurance, medical, and the daily cost of being alive in a house that a retired machinist could no longer afford without help from the son he had told 22 people he did not want. Bernice called me Friday afternoon, not to argue, to ask, how long? How long what? How long until the house is in trouble? The math gives you 4 months before the reserve runs out. After that, the mortgage goes delinquent. Can we talk about this? Dad threw my gift across the table and called me the wrong son. In front of his friends. In front of Aunt Maxine. In front of the caterer. In front of everyone I grew up with. And you held his arm while he did it. We are past talking, Mom. We are at the math. She hung up softly. The kind of hang-up that has weight and regret behind it. The demand letter for the $85,000 arrived at Gavin's law office Monday morning. It sat on his desk between a stack of client files he was 3 weeks behind on and a small coffee cup from the cafe downstairs that he could no longer afford because the cafe charged 4.50 for a latte and Gavin's operating margin was negative. His law office was a one-room suite on the fourth floor of a building in Tigard. The kind of office a young attorney rents when he wants people to think the practice is growing and cannot afford the proof. The nameplate on the door said Odell Law. The bank balance behind the nameplate said $3,200. Gavin called me at noon. You cannot be serious. That money was a family investment. That money was a loan. You signed a promissory note. I have the original in my files. Repayment was due 18 months ago. You have not made a single payment. The firm is still building, Sawyer. Every practice takes time. You do not understand how law works. I understand how money works. Your firm grossed $61,000 last year against $84,000 in operating costs. You lost $23,000 in 12 months. You are not building. You are sinking. And you have been funding the sinking with Mom's medical account. Silence. The kind of silence that happens when a man hears the number he has been hiding from, spoken by the person who set up the account he stole from. Who told you about the medical fund? Nobody told me. I built the account. I set up the alerts. I configured the notifications. Every withdrawal you made generated an email to my inbox. $14,400 over 18 months. 23 separate withdrawals. Each one flagged, time-stamped, and documented. I am a software engineer, Gavin. I build systems that track transactions. Did you think I would not track the ones in my own system? I borrowed it. I was going to put it back. You borrowed from Mom's prescription fund to pay your office rent. The rent on the office that Dad calls a practice. The practice he brags about. The practice he holds up every Thanksgiving as proof that you are the son he wanted. And the practice runs on stolen medical money and an $85,000 loan from the son he did not want. That is not fair. Fair is a word for people who pay their debts. You have 90 days. After that, I filed a civil suit. And I will include the medical fund withdrawals as a separate exhibit because the court should know that the attorney who owes $85,000 was also draining his mother's prescription account to keep his lights on. Gavin hung up. The demand letter gave him 90 days his bank balance could not cover. The civil suit was already drafted by the same attorney who wrote the letter in the safe, and the filing fee was $435, which was less than a single month of the medical fund contributions Gavin had been stealing, which meant the cost of suing him was less than the cost of what he took. Bernice called Wednesday evening. Not to argue. To cry. Your father has not eaten since Sunday. He sits in the den and looks at the safe. He opened it 4 times yesterday. The watch is still in there. He has not taken it out. He just looks at it. Does he understand now? He understands the money. He does not understand why you did it. I did it because he is my father. And he threw it because I am his son. And those two facts should not contradict each other. But in this family, they always have. The social damage was quiet, but complete. Aunt Maxine called Lester on Tuesday. I know because she called me afterward. I told him what I had been wanting to tell him for 34 years, that he spent his whole life looking at Gavin and seeing what he wanted to see, and looking at you and refusing to see what was right in front of him. A son who paid his mortgage. A son who funded his other son's career. A son who set up a medical fund for his wife. A son who bought him an $18,000 watch because he still, after everything, wanted his father to be proud of him. And Lester threw it across the table. What did he say? He said, Gavin is a lawyer. And I said, Gavin is a lawyer who steals from his mother's medical fund. Sawyer is an engineer who fills it. And your father went quiet, Sawyer, the kind of quiet that does not come back. Lester sat in the den on Thursday evening with the safe open. The desk lamp was the only light. The Rolex box was inside the safe navy blue on white paper, the gold clasp catching the lamplight. The attorney's letter was next to it, 3 paragraphs that had reorganized his financial life in the time it took to read them. The mortgage statements were beneath the letter, 48 monthly entries. each one showing a deposit of $1,400 from an account Lester had never looked at, belonging to a son he had never valued. The promissory note Gavin had signed was under the mortgage statements, a single page with a single number and a single signature, $85,000 borrowed and zero repaid. And at the bottom of the stack, the medical fund ledger, showing 2 columns of numbers that told the story of 2 sons more clearly than any sentence Lester had ever spoken at a birthday table. Sawyer's deposits on the left. $800 every month, steady as a pulse. Gavin's withdrawals on the right, $14,400 over 18 months, irregular, desperate. The fingerprints of a man draining his mother's prescription fund to keep an office lease he could not afford. The watch ticked inside the box. The safe was open. The den was dark except for the lamp. And the man who had called his son trash at a birthday party was sitting in a chair at 10 p.m. looking at a safe full of proof that the trash was gold and the gold son was copper, and he had spent 34 years holding the metals up to the wrong light. Monday morning. My apartment in Portland. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee and my laptop open to the code repository I had been working on before the party. The screen was familiar. The cursor blinked. The work was waiting the way work always waits for people who build things, patiently, without judgment, ready to be shaped by hands that know what they are doing. The apartment was quiet. The parking garage below was empty of my father's car. The hallway was empty of his flannel shirt and his shaking hands and his voice asking me to leave the safe alone. The Rolex was not on my wrist. It was in a safe in Beaverton, sitting on a letter, ticking in the dark next to documents that proved a son's love and dollar amounts his father never counted and column headings his father never read. I did not want it back. A gift is a gift even when the person who receives it does not deserve the giver. The watch would sit in that safe and tick for approximately 10 years, which is what the dealer told me about the Submariner's movement reserve. And 10 years was longer than my patience and shorter than my memory, and exactly the right amount of time for a man to sit in a den and listen to the sound of something valuable running down inside a box he once called trash. The mortgage would default in 4 months without my supplement. The law firm would face a civil suit in 90 days without repayment. The medical fund would run dry in 6 weeks without my deposits. And somewhere in Beaverton, a retired machinist was sitting in a house he could not afford, looking at a safe he did not understand, holding a watch he did not deserve. Married to a woman who had kept every secret except the one that mattered, and waiting for a phone call from the son he had told 22 people he never wanted. The phone call was not coming. The deposits were not coming. The son who types on a computer had stopped typing checks. Aunt Maxine called at 7:30. I put her on speaker while I opened my first pull request of the week. "How are you doing, kid?" "I'm working." "Good. Work is the thing they cannot throw across a table." I almost smiled. Not quite, but the muscles moved. "Your father called me last night. He asked me if I thought you would ever come back." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you never left. You were always there. He just never looked at the right sun." I closed the call. I looked at the screen. The code was clean. The architecture was solid. The system I had built processed 10,000 transactions per second without dropping a single one, because I built systems that worked. The way I built mortgage supplements that worked, and medical funds that worked, and startup loans that should have worked if the man who received them had been the man my father believed he was. The cursor blinked steadily. I started typing. The first commit of the week. The work did not care about the watch or the safe or the table. The work cared about the logic, the structure, the precision. And precision was the thing Lester Odell had never understood about his younger son, which was also the thing that had kept his house standing and his wife's prescriptions filled and his older son's office door open for 3 years. Precision is not trash. Precision is what builds things, and the son who types on a computer had built everything. Welcome back to Family Secret Tales. If this story reminded you that the wrong son is usually the one who was right all along, share it tonight. Hit subscribe, Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever given someone the best you had and watched them throw it? I will see you in the next one.